Welcome, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Down Home, a special episode that is the Christmas show. So kick your shoes off and set a spell, grab some sweet tea, or since it's Christmas, maybe some Russian tea, as we reminisce down memory lane. Our main stories for this episode is the story of Boaz, Alabama's Walt Cagle, the history of Christmas in Alabama in the South, a reading of a Christmas essay from a schoolgirl from 1865 from Cahaba, Alabama, and a brief story of a Christmas classic and its Alabama connection. I've even rewrote a few lines of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" with a twist for a treat later on. So let's get to it. So the featured phrase for this show was listener submitted, and it's "Your reindeers have gone berserk," and that came from Still Magnolias, and it refers to someone who has went overboard decorating. I guess you could say a Clark Griswold. But it's good to have y'all back for this show. Christmas is this week. Have y'all finished your shopping yet? I have. But if not, I think it's about time to give up and head on over to the Amazon gift card page and just email out some gift cards at this point. But, speaking of gifts, make sure you don't pull what Aunt Margaret pulled one year. I was unwrapping a gift from her, and when I tore the paper off the box, it was a box for a model of an American Airlines DC-3. And I thought to myself, I got one of these last year from her, and but I wasn't unhappy, because that meant I could have one at home and one at her house. So I opened the box, and I was a little disappointed. It was actually 2 brass reindeers, a ceramic Christmas sleigh that was a Christmas card holder, and a couple of holly and evergreen candle rings that go at the base of candles. As she watched me unwrap it, she said, "Oh, I wondered where those got off to." I looked around and I noticed that those items that were in my box were missing from their usual spots from previous Christmases. And she continued, "I knew I got you one last year, and when I found the box, I just assumed I had gotten you 2, thinking you may have torn up the one from last year, so I wrapped it. And maybe you won't have anyone say to one of your gifts what my dad said when I opened a present for my grandmother one year when I was about 9 or 10. It was a remote-controlled airplane. As soon as I got it open, he looked at it, and right in front of my grandmother who had given it to me, he said, 'You're going to take that back, aren't you?' Even at that age, I knew how rude that was, and I don't know what possessed him to say that. I was quite happy to get the model airplane. But I think the shopping part was some of the best times as well. As a kid, those malls were something else, all decorated up, playing Christmas music, and not the cheap modern stuff, like All I Want for Christmas Is You, which absolutely makes me queasy. But one good thing is, I did read this week where All I Want for Christmas Is You was dethroned from the number 1 Christmas song, and it's held that spot for many years, unfortunately. But anyway, it was dethroned this year. So, and then I think about the Gadsden Mall at Christmas, and I saw some pictures of it the other day, and compared to Christmases past, it really looks awful. And then there were the Birmingham malls like the Galleria, Century Plaza, and the other ones, and it was once a year. It was a once a year treat to get to go down there. I thought we were really something else. And of course, we can't forget the Sears Wish Book and the J.C. Penney toy catalog. As soon as they came in the mail, I would sit for hours bookmarking the pages and making lists. So let's talk about some traditions leading up to the big day and memories of Christmases past. Do you have any traditions or memories that stick out to you from childhood or even now? I'd love to hear about them. Email me, or if you're listening on YouTube, comment below. Growing up, my whole year revolved around Christmas. At the time, we had a large family. Some of my favorite memories leading up to the big day was seeing the lights on the building in Birmingham that formed the wreaths and Christmas stockings. For a child that grew up in rural North Alabama, it was a real treat to go down to Birmingham and see the decorations. Another tradition that I really hold dear is going to the Alabama Theater to see the movies from their Christmas series. Seeing the mighty Wurlitzer organ rise out of the stage while playing Christmas songs full blast and feeling the whole building shake as well as the seat beneath you. My favorite movie they play, of course, is Christmas Vacation. But that's more of a recent tradition, though. As far as I know, they may have been having their Christmas series when I was a young child, but I didn't discover it until late teens, early 20s. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go this year, but it's definitely on my calendar for next year. Another Christmas tradition that I know we all hold dear, even though I've not been to one recently, but that's Christmas plays. And I'm talking about church Christmas plays. Although I know a lady who might disagree about those Christmas plays and special services. Her church was having a service at night for Christmas, and it was the late 80s or early 90s. I can't remember. I think it was the late 80s. So she had nearly a whole can of Aquanet in her hair. Well, they were all holding candles while singing, and the little girl in the pew behind her got a little too close when she got bored to the back of her head, and before she knew it, whoosh, her hair caught up and became part of the Christmas display. Of course, it's always an experience to see the little kids involved in portraying the Christmas message. There's no telling what they will come out with or do. I remember one little girl with cotton balls glued to her face playing a sheep who just got tired of the whole deal and went up and curled up under the altar for a Christmas nap. The only time I was in one, I was so petrified to be in front of the congregation that I sat down in the floor and covered my head with my robe. So those plays are always good for a laugh. Another thing that I like seeing around Christmas time is the bell ringers for the Salvation Army. I've also had the privilege of being one of the bell ringers a couple of times, and that was fulfilling. But I always look forward to seeing them at Christmas time. I've seen them all my life around Christmas, and so it's truly become a part of what I think about Christmas. Then there were the family memories. Christmas was the biggest to do. It lasted for days. Family would come in a few days ahead of the big day. We always had supper at Aunt Margaret's every night leading up to Christmas. One night we would gather and have beans and greens. Another night, chicken and dumplings. On Christmas Eve, we would go to my grandparents on my father's side and have Christmas supper and presents with them and with my uncle, aunt, and cousins. Then we would go to Aunt Margaret's house after that. We would have eaten at grandmother's house beforehand, so we missed their supper, which was always country fried steak, gravy, and biscuits. And with those biscuits, of course, you would have Golden Eagle syrup and butter. Then we would go back home and go to sleep. In the morning, we would wake up and open the presents that Santa Claus had brought. Then we would go back over to Aunt Margaret's to eat Christmas breakfast and then open presents there. After the paper and bows were cleaned up, the adults would sit around all day playing rook and reminiscing until time to start Christmas dinner. And while it cooked, they would continue to play rook. Rook bored me tremendously, so I would get lost in the den, playing with my treasures I had gotten for Christmas. Mama would go back home and take down the Christmas tree at home, which was always depressing for me, and I never understood why she did that, but she always insisted on doing it. To me, in my mind, you're supposed to leave it up till after New Year's. Then she would come back over, and we would all eat Christmas dinner. After dessert and coffee were served, I would escape to the den to rewatch the cartoon, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, of which had kicked off my Christmas season when I would watch it after we ate Thanksgiving supper just the month before. But you never can have enough Grinch, so it's worth rewatching. And speaking of those Christmas morning breakfasts, one Christmas morning we were all gathered around eating breakfast and eyeing the gifts that sat waiting on us in the living room when the phone rang, which was highly unusual on Christmas morning. Aunt Margaret went to answer it on the hall phone when we heard, after a few seconds, "It's Christmas morning, Buster, and you can go jump in a lake." And then a shrill blast from the whistle she kept above the phone, reserved for telemarketers, cut through the air. She came back and sat down like nothing happened and continued eating her biscuits and gravy. We all looked at her, and someone finally asked, "Who was that?" She said it was a telemarketer on Christmas morning of all times. So anytime I receive a call on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning, I always say to myself, just go jump in a lake. Another tradition that I look forward to and cherish the memories of was the cookie exchange. Now, I wasn't directly involved with this one, but I did reap the benefits. When Aunt Margaret worked at First Federal before her retirement, and even after she retired, she would participate, they would hold a cookie exchange. Before work, they would gather at Jack's in downtown, a few blocks over from the office. Each one involved in the cookie exchange would bring a basket of the cookies they had made, which had been individually bundled up. They would all swap cookies. Everyone got a package of everyone else's cookies. I was excited to get to Aunt Margaret's house that Friday night after the cookie exchange to inspect the treasures she had brought in. My favorite was always the rosettes made by Sherry. I love those, and I've never had them anywhere else. I tried to make them one time myself, but nearly burned down my apartment in college. They're very thin, fried shells that are sprinkled with powdered sugar. They're very delicate and shaped into whatever the irons were that you used. In this case, always snowflakes, stars, or bells. But I think my favorite time period of the whole season was Christmas Eve. The sense of impending expectation and the magic of it all came to a climax that night. However, Daddy had a Christmas Eve growing up that wasn't in the top ranking, at least not for him. Now, as the story was relayed to me, Daddy and his family, grandmother, granddaddy, him, and Uncle Lynn, would have their Christmases together as a family at home on Christmas Eve night. And they had ate dinner, and I can't remember, I don't think they had opened presents. But Daddy had done something to get in trouble. And so he was sent to his room, and I think he was maybe 5 years old, around that age anyway, give or take a year. And he was so upset, he thought he was going to miss opening presents. He was going to miss Santa Claus. And as he was laying in his room in the dark, he heard something out in the yard. And so he went to the window to look out, and he started screaming. And he ran through the house and got to grandmother and she said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "It's Rudolph, it's Rudolph," and pulled her into his room and looked out the window. And it was actually a neighbor's cow that had gotten through a fence and decided to spend Christmas Eve in in the side yard beside Daddy's bedroom. So anyway, that's always been a favorite story of mine. Another part of the holiday season that I love is the music. There's some good newer songs, but it's the old standards that reign supreme in my book. Do you have a favorite song or songs? Let me know if you're listening to this on YouTube. Comment below or email me. Some of my favorite Christmas songs include Sleigh Ride, Oh Holy Night, Silver Bells, Mele Kalikimaka, Beautiful Star of Bethlehem, Mary Did You Know, and Joy to the World. And that's just naming a few. It wouldn't feel like Christmas without the old classics filling the house while being played on an old record player. And I still play those old records to this day on the record player during the season. But some of the best memories of Christmas time was those made during the preparations for the actual gatherings and events. I have sat for many hours in a kitchen watching Aunt Margaret cook and bake, and sat watching and helping, if you could call it that, her wrap presents, all while listening to the stories of Christmases past, the days of her childhood during the Great Depression, stories of family members gone on, and her talking about the story of the first Christmas, of which she, of course, was not present for, even though at the time I thought she was old enough to have been. But now I realize she wasn't as old as I thought at the time in the grand scheme of things, now that I'm flying down the great highway of life myself at full speed. Also, I really like Christmas parades. I, however, highly disdain placing the marching band behind the horses in the parade, or anyone else who has to walk. I've marched in a few myself where the organizer was a bit short-sighted in the placement of those horses. I've marched through more ankle-deep piles than I can care to remember. So it's important, if you're a parade organizer, put the horses at the end. So are there any things about the season that you don't like? There's a few things that I dislike, especially how my Christmases play out now, with only a few family remaining. But Mama had one she couldn't stand. Well, two. She always disliked those Christmas candelabras with the light bulbs and the plastic candles in the window. I've always loved them. She especially hated the blue ones. She always said it made the house look like a funeral home. As a kid, I just always thought to myself, now what funeral home has blue candles in the window all lit up? I just thought that was crazy. I don't know where she got that from. The other thing she always couldn't stand is the song Christmas Shoes. I didn't understand that either. I thought it was a sweet and touching song. It always made me sad and made me realize how much my mama meant to me. But I think my biggest dislike about the season is glitter. In my book, glitter is of the devil, and I cannot stand any ornament or decor, wrapping paper, bags, or bows that have glitter. It gets everywhere and you can't get it out. I'm still finding glitter in my truck from last Christmas that fell off a bow, and I can't get rid of it. Well, it's already time for a break, so stay tuned, and when you join me back, we'll have our main stories, which are the story of Boaz's Walt Cagle, the history of Christmas in Alabama and the South, and a Christmas story or essay from a little girl from Cahaba, Alabama from 1865. So I'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's dive into our main stories for today. The first one up is the story of Walt Cagle. If you lived in Boaz or the surrounding areas in the 1920s and 30s, part of your Christmas experience may have included a highly anticipated visit from a man by the name of Walt Cagle. You may have also gotten your winter forecast by old Walt as well. You see, Walt was somewhat of a local philosopher and apparent walking farmer's almanac. He was born on March 6, 1891, and was a rural farmer in northeast Alabama. In 1917, he suffered from what the locals called a sleeping sickness, and afterwards he started gaining weight and could not stop. Standing at 6'2", he eventually ended up weighing about 562 pounds. This was the last estimate on record. This was calculated when he came to town in his mule-pulled wagon with a load of seed to sell. When the wagon was weighed to calculate the amount of seed in tow, they suggested that they get his weight since no human scales could weigh him at that time. So after weighing the wagon with the seed, they told him to jump out, and they got the weight of the wagon again. This revealed a figure of 562 pounds. He eventually grew too large to run the farm, so to pass the time, he sat around and became keenly aware of the animals on his farm as well as the other wildlife. He observed the animals and became quite good at predicting the weather based on his observations, which included just how much nuts the squirrels were storing up for the winter. His knack for predicting the weather was so on point that the neighboring farmers took great heed to his predictions, and he was right more times than he was wrong. He also had time to ponder the questions of life, and therefore was given the name of philosopher. You see, in that day and time, rural farmers in Alabama would go to town once a year to buy their winter essentials, such as long underwear, overalls, and heavier shoes. It became his tradition to go to town to procure his winter essentials about a week before Christmas. After about 2 decades of this Christmas tradition of his, he started to draw more and more attention during his trips to downtown Boaz. His reputation spread far and wide, as an excellent predictor of local winter weather. Locals started observing his purchasing habits and followed suit. If he felt as though it was going to be a rough or long winter, he would buy thicker clothes in greater quantities. Fellow shoppers in town at the time would do the same, and the store clerk would pass word to shoppers that came in after Walt's visit as to what Walt had purchased so they could do the same. His typical overall size was a hefty 72-inch waist. He would special order his overalls, shirts, and shoes at the local department store, Amberson's, in Boaz, though his long underwear couldn't be special ordered and had to be hand-sewn by his wife, Minnie. He would purchase the flannel for the long underwear at Amberson's for the handmade long johns, which required a reported 14 yards per pair. That's both tops and bottom. The store's owner's grandson recalled, later in life in an interview, that Walt would take up the whole sidewalk as he walked down it. He stated that his appearance in town became quite an event. Locals would crowd around while he told stories and predicted the weather. With his popularity increasing year after year, many waited to do their Christmas shopping on the day Walt was expected to come to town in hopes to get a glance of him and hopefully meet the jolly fellow. It seems as though his visits were very good for the town's merchants' sales, so they got together and formed a plan to honor and celebrate the beloved farmer. So in 1935, Mayor Creel declared the day Walter was expected to come to town as Walter Cagle Day and Boaz. However, it had snowed that day, which was really unusual for Boaz, and Walter had been delayed by the death of his old trusty mule that pulled his wagon. So, when he hadn't shown up in town when expected, the town sent for him. The fire department sent out the fire truck over the dirt mountain roads over to Walt's farm to pick him up. Walt mounted the fire truck and they set off for Boaz proper. When the truck reached town, it paraded Walt up and down Main Street for all to see. The festivities that day included a presentation of the key to the city to Walt, and he also enjoyed a fried chicken feast. It didn't stop there either. He also judged the Miss Boaz pageant as well as the Miss North Alabama pageant. Before the actual day he came to town, the locals started bringing gifts for Walt, and they numbered so many that they had to be stored in a local warehouse awaiting Walt's arrival. A national reporter from Chattanooga caught wind of Walt's story and the impeding Walt Cagle Day and made the trip down to Boaz to cover the story. And he reported that the events of that day and noted that there was about 5,000 people from far and near that visited downtown just for that occasion. Walt received so much attention from the media that his story spread across the country, and he was invited to New York City to be interviewed on a radio program. He made the trip to New York by train, but was too large to fit in the coach seats, so Walt had to ride in the train's baggage car. But that didn't upset him. He was happy to make the trip, and so he happily sat in the train's baggage car and made the most of his trip to New York. With his celebrity in full swing, he started making appearances on behalf of the Lee Jean Company, of which provided him with free pairs of overalls as needed. The promotions included giant-sized overalls and his size being displayed in store windows to bring attention to the brand. Walt Cagle Day and Boaz was such a hit that year in 1935 that Boaz made it an annual event, holding the celebration in 1936 and again in 1937. Sadly, though, in 1937, that would be the final year for Walt Cagle Day, as Walt passed from a heart attack at the age of 47 on June 29th or the 30th, it's disputed, in 1938. It was reported that Walt was buried in 80-inch pants, and his casket had to be special made in Birmingham and shipped by train to Boaz. The casket measured 7 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 31 inches deep, and took 16 pallbearers to carry. Oddly, the same report recounted his legendary breakfast, which was said to include 1 dozen eggs, 2 gallons of milk, a half gallon of sorghum syrup, and 20 biscuits. However, I believe that may have been exaggerated just a bit. Being a big guy myself, I don't see how anybody of any size could get all that down. Walt was laid to rest in Thrasher Cemetery in Mountainboro, Alabama, just outside the city of Boaz, who held him so dear. In that day and time, I'm sure that Walt was unfortunately a spectacle, being the size he was, and it's more common to see people of that size today. So I'm sure it did bring many spectators. I'm sure to encourage him and probably also to gawk and make fun of. But I'm glad his story lives on. So with that, let's move on to our next story, and that is the history of Christmas in Alabama. Did you know that our modern idea of Christmas, its traditions, decorating trees, gift giving, charitable work, etc., has its roots here in Alabama and the southern U.S. as a whole, as far as the U.S. is concerned with Christmas traditions? In Boston's early history, it was considered a sin and a crime to hold celebrations on Christmas. In the early colonies, the day might be celebrated by a fancy meal, but not much more. Definitely no revelry or partying. In Jamestown, some colonists recognized the day as a day of peace and certainly devoid of the trappings and traditions of Christmas we hold dear today. In 1843, Charles Dickens published A Christmas Carol, which solidified the Victorian idea of Christmas to be celebrated peacefully and humbly by intimate gatherings of family, close friends, and helping the less fortunate. But it seems as though us Southerners wanted a little bit more. A more celebratory atmosphere with throwing parties, singing, and some, well, drinking of spirits for some, and in general, hanging out with a larger group of friends with extended periods of celebrating the holiday. Alabama was the first state to make Christmas a state holiday in 1836, with Louisiana and Arkansas following suit in 1838. It wasn't until June 26, 1870, that Christmas became an official federal holiday for the United States. Oklahoma was the last state to make it an official state holiday in 1907. It seems as though that our Christmas in the South in the early days was heavily influenced by a Yankee neighbor from the North by the name of Washington Irving, who in 1819 published a collection of Christmas stories based in an English manor house called The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Canyon, Gent. Even one of the most beloved Christmas songs was written in the South by a northern transplant by the name of James Lord Pierpont. Jingle Bells was written in Savannah, Georgia in 1857, and it originally was considered a Thanksgiving song, though through the years it became a song strictly associated with Christmastime. Seeing as though Savannah is one of the hottest places I've ever set foot in, it's odd that a song about dashing through the snow in a sleigh would be written in such a place. However, having been a transplant from New England, he was inspired by the heavy snows of his younger years. So it seems as though we have Southerners, with Alabama leading the pack, to thank for getting the snowball rolling on what Christmas has become today for many Americans and heavily influencing many of the traditions we hold dear. We may have not invented decorating trees, singing, and such, but we led the way in kicking off the U.S. embracing those celebrations and tradition. Now let's take a look at a little snapshot of what life during Christmas time would have been like for a typical Southern child back in 1865. This Christmas essay was written by Kitty E. Watson, and she was a student at the Female Academy in Cahaba, here in Alabama. And it reads, Christmas is the birthday of our Savior. It comes on the 25th of December. Christmas is a happy time for schoolgirls, for then they have holiday. There is a great deal of pleasure in the giving and receiving of presents. When we get up in the morning, the first thing we do is peep into our stockings to see what Santa Claus has brought us. How disappointed we are if they are filled with switches. Then comes breakfast and the nice eggnog, and then at dinner we have roast turkey. This is what we all used to have before the war, but I expect a great many of us will miss our roast turkey and eggnog this year, and have our stockings filled with switches, as they are more plentiful than most anything else now. Some persons have Christmas trees for their children, and they look very pretty with their branches loaded with toys of all kinds and lighted up with candles. On Christmas Eve, Santa Claus pays us a visit. He rides in a sleigh drawn by 6 reindeers, and he comes down the chimney with a bundle on his back, looking like a peddler, and fills our stockings with toys, candy, and a great many other nice things. I hope he has not forgotten the way to Cahaba, but will remember us all this year. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. So there you have a little snapshot of what a Christmas celebration would have looked like in post-Civil War era Alabama. Let's see, that was dated 1865, so the war would have just been ending at that point. So that's why she mentions that or she alludes to the fact that things are scarce during that time. And before we go to another break, I have a little interesting tidbit of a fact for you. Um, the beloved Christmas song, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, originated from a movie that starred Judy Garland, Meet Me in St. Louis. And the song actually has roots here in Alabama. It was written in 1943 by Hugh Martin and Ralph Blaine for the movie, and it was written in Birmingham at Hugh Martin's estate, or excuse me, his family's home in Birmingham. And the original lyrics were very gloomy and very different from the song that we know today and the song that actually made the movie. When presented with the lyrics, Judy Garland refused to sing it in the film to her younger co star and said that it was absolutely too dreary and that the audience would hate her if she sang such a song to her younger counterpart. And after a lot of after a lot of protest and arguing, Hugh finally decided to change the lyrics and to make them a little brighter. And that's how the classic Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas came to be. And now it's time for another break. So stick with us and we'll be back in just a second. Welcome back. So let's talk about some of my favorite things about the holiday season, and that's, of course, the food and treats. Some of my favorite things are eggnog, rosette cookies, red velvet cake, coconut cake, mincemeat pie, But that's actually kind of a northern thing. When I mention mincemeat to a lot of people, um, I get funny looks. They've never heard of it before. But it's basically minced up fruit, apples, raisins, um, some beef fat, all the fall and Christmas spices, and I think there may be nuts in it. But anyway, it's very nice. And like I said, that's more of a northern thing. And I believe that came to our family by way of an uncle from Ohio. Um, but my all time favorite treat for Christmas is an orange date nut cake. Aunt Margaret used to make those, and she would spend a couple of days making them. It was very time consuming. And then, of course, the no bake oatmeal cookies, wedding cookies, fruitcake. Yes, I'm one of those weirdos who like fruitcake. And of course, it wouldn't be Christmas without Christmas tree cakes by Little Debbie. And another favorite Christmas thing of mine is Russian tea. I know most people go bonkers for hot chocolate and peppermint hot chocolate, but my thing is Russian tea. And I don't really like hot drinks to begin with, but I do like Russian tea. And if you don't know what that is, it became really popular in the South, and but it's basically a base tea with lemon and orange flavors in it, and then all the spices. When you think of fall spices, it has all of those in there. Um, but anyway, and I done a little research on it, and it appears that it's not really Russian, but it is a favorite of mine. And it's really easy to make. The modern way to make it is some tang. A lot of people have forgotten about tang, but it's still around. You mix that with instant lemonade mix and instant tea mix and add your spices, and it's really good. But anyway, moving on. Has the feeling of Christmas changed for you? Of course, it has for me, since everyone, most of my family has passed on. I'm left with a couple of immediate family members, and then cousins, of course. But it's more than that. It's more than just getting older and no longer being a child. Christmas just feels a little transactional now and not an experience. The magic and the tingle have seemed to not gone, but definitely faded. And at times it feels cold, distant, and disconnected. Instagram has people chasing a trendy aesthetic than something from the heart. Monochromatic themes that feel like life has just been sucked out of them. I miss the feeling of a cozy home with wood paneling, multicolored lights on a not so perfect tree, ornaments and decor from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, passed down and used year after year. Decor you counted on being there year after year with memories tied to each thing, placed in the same spot as last year. Things that were held on to and repaired if broken, instead of tossed and replaced with something cheap and gaudy from Walmart, only to be replaced again next year. Ornaments made in school and Sunday school, the dried okra pods painted to look like Santa, and the odd little wooden Santa painted by a cousin at school with a full white beard but a jet black mustache. Satin ball ornaments on the tree, and um, knit stockings with reindeers on them. Um, Bubble lights bubbling. That's one of my favorite Christmas decorations. Bubble lights. You don't see a lot of them anymore, but I have them. Bing Crosby singing Christmas in Killarney, or Perry Como singing Home for the Holidays, playing on an old record player. Yes, we still played records on the record player during my childhood, and I'm so glad vinyl's making a comeback. And then when I was growing up, uh, in the very early years, We had the glistening metallic tinsel on the tree and Christmas scenes with red candles painted in store windows while illuminated garland trimmed light pole decorations um, which lined main streets. Of course, we can't forget the reruns of Christmas specials, which of course would include Lawrence Welk with Norma Zimmer belting out I'll Be Home for Christmas, or the kissing kitten Joanne Castle hammering out Sleigh Ride on the piano while grinning ear to ear and wearing a bouquet of holly as big as her head on her shoulder. Now it's too commercial, it feels like. Branded decor and wrapping paper abounds, like Disney's Frozen or Minions oogling you with their one eye and all their garish yellowness. There was once a sacred reverence. It was an event. The world slowed and stood still. It was special. You sat down with the family, ceasing the bustle to catch that movie or special, like Charlie Brown's Christmas. There was a togetherness. The scarcity made it even more special. You had to stop and enjoy it because you couldn't recapture it or replay it later on demand. Now you can stream it all on demand, which cheapens it all, I feel like. No one comes together like they used to. We all sit in a corner alone in another room while either on our phone or tablet or computer streaming. Growing up, I heard all of my grandparents and great aunts and uncles talk about when they were children, their stockings would be filled with oranges, peppermint sticks, unshelled pecans that had been gathered in yards leading up to Christmas, and maybe a small handmade toy from a scrap of wood, or maybe a doll made from corn shucks. Their few presents were sure to include a new set of long johns and maybe a pair of shoes, although new shoes usually came at hog slaughtering time in the fall as the weather turned cold so they would have shoes to wear to school. One great uncle of mine was so excited to get a new pair of long johns that he barely took time to notice whether he had a top or bottom, but jumped into it as if it were the bottoms. When he had got them on as best he could, he complained that his fit awful. It was pointed out that he had put the top on his pants. His legs were the sleeves. His legs were in the sleeves, and no wonder the thing wouldn't stay pulled up, and the straddle was riding a little bit low. They would decorate their trees with popcorn popped over an iron stove or open hearth that they sat for hours stringing together with needles and thread. They would make paper chains out of scrap paper collected over the year that wasn't used in the outhouse. Well, for those who had outhouses, even those were luxury at times, especially during the Depression. It seems as though their Christmases were cozier. They didn't have as much as we do now. By far they didn't. But they made the best of it. A true spirit of togetherness and goodwill abounded. Great appreciation for what they had when there was so little to be had. Those little treasures they got that day meant the world, and that's just what they were, treasures. Put up and rationed out to enjoy as long as possible. They truly appreciated and were grateful for what they received. Now it seems all too often people go far overboard. I know it's only natural to want to give your children more than what you had growing up, but it seems all too much now. It's like they want to see who can outdo the other. Parents who have split try to outdo each other to win over the favor of the kids who are unfortunately being used as pawns in a nasty, childish, and traumatizing game, or neighbors trying to outdo neighbors, or children comparing theirs with others, and out of fear of giving them a complex, we go out and spend even more. But I digress. What are a couple of items that you always try to incorporate into your decorations that always puts you in the Christmas mood and makes you feel like it's Christmas? For me, it's plaid or tartan. Christmas colors, of course, red, green, and then there's red poinsettias. The bigger, the better. I don't know what it is about poinsettias, but they're probably my favorite Christmas symbol of all, except the baby Jesus, of course. And another thing I like about Christmas are the movies. My all-time favorite Christmas movie is Christmas Vacation, and I like How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the original cartoon. I do like the newer movie with Jim Carrey in it, but I always go back to the original. Another favorite of mine, and it's kind of obscure, it's not very popular, but that's Prancer. Um, and then there's, of course, A Christmas Story. I do like that, but sometimes I feel it's a little overplayed at Christmas. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, Home Alone. And before our time's up for today, let's go back to that Christmas movie, Prancer. I believe it was released in 1989, and I won't go into the plot of it, but it's basically a girl who is missing her mother at Christmas, being raised by her father. She's losing the Christmas spirit. She's beginning to think Christmas maybe isn't all that. And she finds an escaped reindeer, an actual reindeer, and hides it and tries to nurse it back to health. But anyway, did you know that movie had an Alabama connection? And you might ask, how on earth would a movie about a reindeer and snow, what would that have to do with Alabama? Well, the reindeer that starred as Prancer in that movie was an Alabama native. That's right, a reindeer named Boo from Huntsville was the star of the movie, Prancer. Co-starring with him was also Sam Elliott, Johnny Galecki of Christmas Vacation fame, Cloris Leachman, and Abe Vigoda. And if you haven't seen that movie, I really encourage you to look it up and watch it. It's a really good movie, and the time that it's set in the rural setting, the imagery and the style of everything reminds me so much of Christmases of my childhood. So if you're a 35 to 40-year-old, I encourage you to really look it over. It might bring back some good memories. Well, it's come time to close out now, but I want to leave you with a little Christmas poem, if I may. I took the liberty of reworking "Twas the Night Before Christmas," aka A Christmas Visitor, and I hope you like it. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, no, not even a mouse. Having put on my new PJs from the Gap, I had just settled in for a long winter's nap. When from down the hall, what did I hear? Why, it was Aunt Margaret blowing her distress whistle in a telemarketer's ear. I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and join us next time. And next episode will be our New Year's episode. And remember, above all, Jesus is the reason for the season, the only reason. If you have a story that you'd like us to tell or cover, or if you have a question or would like something answered and to be featured on the show, or have any comments, email us here at the show. The email address is contactdownhomeshow@gmail.com. I encourage any input, comments, words of encouragement, or otherwise, any suggestions. But anyway, I hope you and yours have a very Merry Christmas. And this is the Rambling Southern Gentleman signing off. Until next time.